Also with us this hour, Alan Blinder. He's the former vice chair of the Federal Reserve, now a professor at Princeton University. Alan, it's good to have you with us. Just picking up really on where Vanessa left off there, pointing out that, yes, inflation maybe didn't heat up as much, but is certainly not closer back down to that magic 2% number. When you look at this, what do you anticipate we will see in September at that Fed meeting?
Well, I think what we know is that the effects of tariffs are mostly in the future. Some are in the past. And it's true when people say, well, they don't look so bad so far. And it is true. But a lot of it is in the future. And we can expect the core inflation rate to keep tripling up. And, I don't want to exaggerate. It's gone up the last couple of months, very little though. And it has especially gone up in places that seem most vulnerable to tariffs. Mm-hmm. So I think the basic story that tariffs were going to push inflation up is intact, although the more hysterical versions of it that were speaking about very large increases in inflation. Fortunately, I was not one of those. Don't look so good right now.
They don't, and it's raised questions certainly over the last few weeks, I would say, maybe months, of is this a boy who cried wolf situation, that there is so much talk about how devastating the tariffs are going to be. Of course, it took a long time to get those numbers set in terms of the tariffs. But to your point about this will be trickling out, how long does that last?
Well, there's not one number. It's going to, it's sort of month by month. And as you may have noticed, President Trump tends to change his mind now and again. So, for example, the huge tariff on China was on the verge of coming in. He just postponed it for 90 days. So on that one, we know it's going to be more than 90 days until we have an effect. There are others that are coming in effect at various and sundry times. So it's a dribble in effect of the tariffs on inflation. No one number, but if you want to get a handle on it, I would say you need to think 3-4 months ahead or something like that. Again, no magic number, but something like that.
Sure, but certainly a little bit further away. As we watch all of that, I do want to get your take on President Trump's nominee to head the Bureau of Labor Statistics, E.J. Antony. So putting out in an interview, right, these details released this week in an interview from last week, he was saying that until the BLS can change the way that it pulls this data collection together, that the monthly jobs report should be suspended. There's now been some backtracking on that. Stephen Moore telling CNN that Antony actually told him that he would no longer push to suspend putting out those monthly reports in favor of only the quarterly reports. Can you just put into context for me what that would mean should those monthly reports go away?
I think as soon as those monthly reports go away, if they do, there's going to be tremendous suspicion about cooking the books. A lot of us would like to know, right? First of all, I never heard of this gentleman before he was named to head the BLS. That doesn't mean that he should never be named, but this is not one of the names that one might think of. He doesn't have any experience in this domain. And in your last segment, I heard someone quoting him as saying, we don't have a MAGA person running the BLS. We should not have a MAGA or an anti-MAGA person running the BLS. That's a non-political position. And almost all the holders of that position up to this point in time have been non-political people. It's a technical job, not a political job. And if you start suspending numbers, there's going to be suspicions all over the place, not just from politicians of the other party, but from market people and foreign investors and you name it.
We've talked about the importance of independent institutions in the context of the Federal Reserve, obviously, when we're talking about President Trump. And of course, you know that world quite well. But I think you're referring to some reporting from my colleague Kevin Liptak at the top of the hour here, who was talking about the fact that the Bureau of Labor Statistics has historically been an independent agency. Do you believe we are approaching a point in this country where these historically independent agencies, whether we're talking about the BLS, whether we're talking about the Federal Reserve, Are those days waning, or can there still be these independent bodies under President Trump, who, as we know, does appreciate and in many cases demand loyalty?
I'm very worried. I wish I could answer a confident yes. I guess I should say yes. If he changes his stripes, uh, and you could decide how likely you think that is, we can go back quickly to independent statistical agencies. The personnel is all there, the traditions are there, the software is there, and so on. But as long as President Trump insists that loyalty to him is the most important qualification for office, including the head of the statistical agency, not to mention the head of the Fed. That's a whole different story. But as long as he's insisting on that, I think the independence of all of these statistical agencies, the BLS is only the most obvious one, is in question and in danger.
There's also talk, and I think you started to touch on this, about concerns over what this could mean for the data, how trustworthy it was. There are questions about losing faith, not just in the data, but frankly, in the United States. What does this mean for the United States on a broader global scale?
I think foreign investors have been looking at the United States for decades as a source of trustworthy data, as the gold standard is often put. The BLS is often named as the world gold standard in data quality, for example. And if you start casting doubt on that, you're going to have domestic and foreign investors spooked and wondering whether they can trust the numbers that are coming out of the United States economy. One concrete example of that, having to do with the CPI rather than the jobs report, the CPI that came out today, is that the TIPS, the Treasury Inflation Protection Securities, which are bought by investors all over the world, are linked to the CPI. And if people start thinking the government is monkeying around with the CPI, that's a good way to kill that market.
Alan Blinder, really appreciate your expertise and your insight today. Thank you.